The price of silver is going to crash just like it did last time. Or is it? Welcome to Stacks and Stats. I'm your boy Sangeeth, and let's take a look today at why silver might actually be heading to the moon instead of crashing like it did in 1980 and in 2011. Now, there's a lot of buzz about silver hitting the $50 mark, which is an amazing milestone for this precious metal. In fact, I think it traded at around $52 USD intraday yesterday. And today it's hovering just below $52. So it's holding steady at around that $50 mark. Now, one metric that I want to look at is the gold-silver ratio. Now, the gold-silver ratio, simply put, is how much silver can you get for 1 unit of gold. So unit for unit, if I have 1 gram of gold, how much silver will that buy? If I have this much silver, how much gold will it buy? And vice versa. And you can do this in grams, in ounces, in kilos, what have you. Now, when silver peaked in 1980, and that was a result of the Hunt brothers cornering the silver market, there's tons of videos on YouTube on how and why that happened. But in 1980, the silver price spiked to $50 an ounce. Now, the gold-silver ratio back in 1980 was 17 to 1. Now, what this means is 17 ounces or 17 pieces or units of silver will have bought you 1 ounce, 1 unit, 1 gram of gold. Now, what's even crazier is if you take a look at that gold-silver ratio being 17 to 1 and you take a look at $50 silver back in 1980, if you adjusted for inflation in today's prices, and today being October 2025, you're talking $200 silver. $200 silver per ounce. And we've just broken the $50 mark. Now let's take a look at 2011, when silver hit almost $50 an ounce a second time. And let's take a look at the gold ratio then. So the gold to silver ratio back in 2011 was 31 to 1. Again, still lower than the historical average, which makes, which is an argument to say that silver was overbought and might be a little bit too expensive. And if you adjusted for inflation, even back in 2011, that would equal, in today's money, again, October 2025, that would put silver at $135 US per ounce. So let's fast forward to today, 2025. What is the gold-silver ratio right now? It is 80 to 1. It's hovering around that 80 to 1 ratio. Now, that's completely out of the historical norms. In fact, this signifies that silver, even at the $50 mark price that it's at right now, is still cheap historically, given the amount of inflation that we've had. Now, nominally, when silver hits that $50 per ounce mark, that's kind of a psychological win. But in the grand scheme of things, when you account for inflation, which honestly, you have to account for inflation, it's nothing. Silver still has so much more runway to go. Now let's take a look at an even crazier stat. The amount that they're actually mining out of the ground. What is the gold-silver ratio of what they're mining out of the crust of the earth right now? And that ratio is 8 to 1. That means that they are only mining 8 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold, which is an insane stat if you think about it, which means that the amount of supply that's currently out there is so much closer to the amount of gold. And you take a look at that price difference, gold is over $4,100 an ounce. So if you adjust for the ratio of just how much silver is actually being mined, and you use that metric, silver should technically be at $500 an ounce. Now, what happened in 1980 was a bit of an anomaly with the Hunt brothers cornering the silver market. One could make an argument that won't ever happen again. Safeguards have been put in place where the market can't be manipulated by two individuals. Now, I want to take a look at what actually happened in 2011, because that really wasn't that long ago. What happened in 2011 following the global financial crisis is that a lot of people lost faith in the paper market. They lost faith in currency. And a lot of them wanted to flock to precious metals just because they wanted to hedge against inflation. Sounds a lot like what's happening today. A lot of people they just couldn't afford gold, especially after losing as much money as they did in the 2008 financial crisis. A lot of people flocked to silver, and they saw silver as poor man's gold, which is what also helped to drive silver prices up. Another parallel that we can find is currently happening today. Physical silver all over the world is slowly going out of stock. And you can see this online, even here in the West, when you take a look at a lot of online retailers, and they are pending stock to arrive within the next couple weeks. The parallels of what happened in 2011 and what are happening now are almost identical as to why silver is going up. Now, what happened post 2011 is that the silver price actually crashed. So it's easy to ask the question, well, what makes us think that won't happen now? Why should I be piling into silver? It crashed after 1980. It crashed after 2011. What's different about today? Now, what happened after 2011, post-financial crisis, '08 financial crisis, is that there was massive QE, quantitative easing, done by the Fed. Now, what that means is they printed tons of money to bail out the banks and the big institutions, right? And a lot of people saw this. A lot of the public was like, you know what? There's a lot of money printing done by the Fed, and I need to protect my purchasing power. And they piled into gold and silver. Now, the reason why the gold and silver prices ended up pulling back significantly is that a lot of people realized that inflation, that all the QE that the Fed did not go directly to consumers. It went to the banks. It went to purchase mortgage-backed securities, and it stayed in the financial system. Very little of that money actually made it to the households of regular folk. And a lot of people, their risk appetite after 2008 was very low. The banks did not want to lend, and people did not want to borrow. They did not want to over-leverage themselves like they had done prior. So long story short, the money was printed, it was given to the financial system, and it stayed in the financial system. Now, that's a stark difference as to what happened post-2020. Now, there was massive money printing that happened post-2020. Now, the big difference between what happened in 2020 versus what happened post-2008 global financial crisis is that what happened in 2020 was that the government and the Fed, they printed money and gave it directly to you. They gave it directly to consumers. They printed checks and mailed them out to every adult with a pulse. It went straight into your pocket, straight into households, straight into businesses. And then essentially you had all this money that went directly to consumers that were chasing the same finite amount of goods. And you see this with the prices of gold and silver slowly starting to tick up 2021. And then when 2022 hit, after people were starting to wake up to the negative effects of inflation, precious metals took off like a rocket. Now, this did not happen post 2011. We saw a much stronger US dollar in the years to follow. So after the price of silver crashed in 2011, in the years following 2012, 2013, 2014, you had the dollar on the Dixie, on the dollar index, go from 73 in 2011 all the way up to 100 by 2014. And a lot of people saw this, and most people know that a strong dollar equals lower prices in precious metals. Confidence was restored back into the dollar, back into the system, and a lot of people started to divest from gold and silver because they wanted assets that would actually generate money instead of having something just sit there in a safe or a vault. Now, it's really hard to make the same argument for what's happening right now. We have a president who is headstrong on lowering interest rates. He's pushing the Fed, almost bullying the Fed to lower interest rates. And this is happening at a time where inflation is slowly ticking up. Let's be real, inflation never went away. Most people believe that the Fed just gave up on their fight on inflation. Has it come down from its historic levels of being 9% back in 2021, 2022? Yes, but they keep changing the definition of how they measure inflation. And a lot of people with boots on the ground will know that the numbers that are reported by the FOMC are just not an accurate depiction of what's actually going on in real life. So the Fed pretty much gave up on their pursuit to tackle inflation to have it under or around that 2% mark. And in fact, in over 20 FOMC meetings, they have never been able to get it within the range reasonably in any meaningful way. They've never been able to get it in the range that they want it to be. And now we have the CPI reports coming in that are showing inflation is slowly ticking back up. And we have the Fed that is bullied into essentially lowering rates into higher inflation. And people still think that silver has hit its ceiling at $50. I mean, let's be real here. The biggest economy in the world is facing a debt crisis. They have managed to double their debt in just the past 10 years. And each successive year, there seems to be a bigger and bigger deficit in their budget. You have the US government that is trying their best to lower rates. They're bullying the Fed to lower rates so they can start the quantitative easing, so they can service this massive amount of debt that they're currently spending more money servicing than they are on Social Security or their defense. Now, take that in. You're talking about the world's biggest military power that has ever existed, that is spending more money on servicing their debt than they are on their military, which speaks volumes as to how bad this crisis is. With all this being said, I don't see the price of silver crashing like it did after 1980 or 2011. The price of silver definitely has more tailwinds than it does headwinds. There is massive de-dollarization happening all over the world, and people are slowly waking up to the fact that the US dollar is not as strong as it once was. People are noticing that your dollar is just not purchasing as much, and just like what happened in 1980 and 2011, people will be piling into gold and silver. The only thing is, I don't think that they will be in a rush to get back out until something massive changes. I personally don't see the US dollar gaining strength against other currencies anytime soon. And with all things being considered, I think the only way that they can get out of this crisis that they've created is to print their way out. And if you print your way out, it just means more inflation. More inflation means more people piling into gold and silver. So that's why I believe the silver price has a lot more runway to go. If you agree with me or disagree with me, sound off in the comments, and I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe this video. Thank you so much for watching.